We'll now move on to Senator Carter with Senate Bill 285. Senator Carter, you're up.
Happy Valentine's Day, JPR. I appreciate your patience. I know that romance awaits, at least I hope it does for some of you. I'll try to make this brief and interesting. It's a really important bill, and I know the hour is late, and I hate that it is, but it is what it is. Okay, I have a panel that I'm asking to come up. My panel on this bill is Dayvon Love, Beverly John, Yanet Amanuel, and I think I have the wrong name from the Office of the Public Defender, but if there is someone from the Office of the Public Defender here in support, you're welcome to come up. I had Deborah Levy, but I don't think she's here. Let me just start by speaking from the heart, and then I'll go into the details of my testimony. Mr. Chairman and members of this committee, oftentimes we say here in Annapolis that when people are on two sides of an issue and neither side is happy at the outcome, then we've done good work. Well, sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not. But one of the things that's super important is when we went through the laborious work of police reform in 2021, we did some significant work when it came to accountability, transparency, dealing with the disciplinary process, but we omitted a super important part of it, which is the concept of real civilian oversight. When I came back to the Senate from life outside of being in an elected office, I had worked for years with the Baltimore City Civilian Review Board, and that board had power to investigate police claims of complaints of police misconduct. And it also had some subpoena power. And when I came here, I thought it was a natural progression that we would enhance that type of power. And so we go about the business of creating House Bill passing the law 670 in 2021 with the, I thought, legitimate intention of enhancing that civilian power, but we didn't. We actually have limited by the police accountability boards not having any authority to have investigatory powers and subpoena power. And so earlier today, the Attorney General spoke a lot about public trust and confidence. Well, one of the most significant ways that we can actually ensure public trust and confidence is give the public the real right and real ability to oversee the conduct of law enforcement in their jurisdiction. The very existence of civilian oversight serves to improve the quality of internal investigations. Under our current structure, even though we put civilians or non-law enforcement on administrative charging committees, we did nothing to further the cause of an independent investigation outside of what internal affairs does. So with that, I'm going to try to keep my testimony short because I think I've hit the points I want you to hear, and I want you to hear from the witnesses. But there are some really important things I think that we have to consider if we're serious about really wanting to improve the institution of policing. And honestly, if we're serious about wanting to ensure that our people, our constituents, have power and have trust and confidence in us and in law enforcement. So this bill closes the gaps that we left behind in the 2021 Policing Accountability Act. It also, by providing subpoena and investigatory powers, police accountability boards will not be forced to take police investigations at face value, but they will be able to investigate simultaneously with police internal investigations to reach the most honest and accurate response and to prevent and rectify misconduct. Instead of simply awaiting the results of an internal investigations from police, State's Attorney Ivan Bass talked about earlier how, and it's been referenced by members of this committee just now in the last bill, how he came in and he released someone named Keith Davis, who had gotten notoriety and had a whole movement behind, the claims that he was innocent and wrongly arrested to begin with, because law enforcement had shot at him 44 times. Well, let me just tell you, when I went to work in the Civil Rights Office, there was an ongoing investigation that the Civilian Review Board had Internal Affairs had already dismissed it out of hand that there was no misconduct, but it was the Civilian Review Board, their independent investigatory power that was able to come up with the result, the conclusion that law enforcement used excessive force. I think that's very significant. Had it not been for that Civilian Review Board's powers, that would have never come out. And that gave the public great satisfaction, trust, and confidence that there was some entity somewhere that they could depend on to investigate and make truthful determinations outside of law enforcement. I've said this before, but it bears repeating. The very concept of civilian oversight and independent investigations improves the quality of internal investigations. That is important because we cannot have true accountability if we restrict civilians' ability to have oversight of their law enforcement. This is an important bill. All it does is give authority to police accountability boards, as we passed, to have investigatory powers and subpoena powers. It does not give them the ability to stand in the stead of the internal administrative process, but to have an outside independent process. And I challenge us. I really believe that only if we allow this will we really see the results that we were striving for in 2021 with the other legislation that we passed. This is a critical bill. It's a critical concept. I think we owe it to the people of Maryland to allow this to happen. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Smith and members of the committee. My name is Yanet Amanuel, Public Policy Director of the ACLU of Maryland, here in support of SB 285. And just to clarify, this bill simply just allows local jurisdictions to give their local PABs independent investigatory powers. It does not mandate it. It just clarifies that they do, in fact, have the authority to do so. You have a written testimony, and you'll hear from dozens of folks today about how critical these powers are to adequately hold police accountable for misconduct and establish trust between the community and law enforcement. So I will focus my remarks on addressing the opposition. First off, there is no provision in the Maryland Police Accountability Act that prohibits local bodies from giving their boards these powers either in place of internal affairs or parallel with them. Furthermore, the MPAA does not have any preemption clause that would indicate that the legislator's intention was to bar this implementation of certain police accountability mechanisms and thereby preclude any local innovations or experimentation. Second, giving the PABs independent investigatory powers is not inconsistent with police agencies also having the authority, nor will it unequal the playing field. Baltimore City, like Senator Carter just pointed out, and Prince George's County Complaint Oversight Panel have had similar powers for decades. And although these boards have been significantly underfunded and under resources, the independent investigations performed by the CRB staff have proven to just show how critical it is to have an option of conducting independent civilian-led investigations into complaints. Beyond the increased trust and cooperation of complainants show the CRB investigators, the CRB and the Public Integrity Bureau disagreed in 26% of concurrent investigations. Finally, opponents may argue that giving PABs investigatory authority would undermine the uniform disciplinary process that HB 670 sought to create. And while there's no doubt that the legislators sought to create a uniform process, authorizing PABs to conduct independent investigations does not change the process in any way. It simply just changes the identity of the people engaged in one of the tasks that are in part of the disciplinary process. Taking the position that only the police can investigate, the police would treat the repeal of Leo Bohr utterly meaningless. Allowing the PABs to conduct independent investigations, PABs could provide a greater likelihood that investigations will be meaningful and that the public will actually trust the outcomes. And for the foregoing reasons, the ACLU of Maryland urges a favorable report. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman and committee members. My name is Beverly John. I am currently serving in the Prince George's County Coalition for Police Accountability, which, like many other counties, we are a community-centered coalition of organizations and individuals who worked with our county leadership in implementing HB 670 over the past year. During that exercise, we really came to realize why this particular bill clarification is so important from the state level. because we were very proud of the work that we were able to do with our county leadership in terms of crafting our own local police accountability board. And some of the things like, the membership, we were able to come to agreement on who should be on the PAB, staff and budgeting for the police accountability board so that it could be effective and have the resources that it needs to do the job that it is called to do. Unfortunately, this particular issue of investigatory powers and subpoena powers is really the crux of whether or not this police accountability boards across the state will be effective and successful in doing what we think and know is very important, which is building trust and confidence between the community and law enforcement. That trust and confidence has been broken. It needs to be repaired. And it's not just a perception of the fact. The facts are we have several hundreds of families with lived experience of having loved ones killed, seriously harmed, and traumatized without any accountability, without any recourse given to them. And this is what we see as a first step, in giving the community what it needs. And I urge for a favorable report on this bill. Thank you.
All right, good evening, committee. Dayvon Love, Director of Public Policy, Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. All industries that are insulated from meaningful oversight are prone for corruption. And when you think about the importance of community oversight of law enforcement, which is actually one of the major policy demands that comes out of the civil rights and Black Power movement, the idea of the community having an independent instrument being able to investigate law enforcement, given the fact that, when we go to the ballot box, the contestation over the ability to deliver public goods, and one of those public goods is public safety. And so the community should have an independent instrument that allows them to engage in investigation. When you look at the DOJ report that I've referenced constantly, the Restoring Trust in Policing Commission from 2020, the Graham report, you'll see that there are lots of unsustained complaints that would otherwise be sustained if they were subject to public scrutiny. And so when you look at all those reports, there are reams of evidence of misconduct and harm that's been done, particularly Black and brown folks in our community around the state. I'm not talking about just killings, but just all the forms of abuse and misconduct that happen constantly that for many of us, we would consider criminal. And if we ask ourselves the question, well, why is it that this kind of violence can be so persistent? It is because there is not an independent mechanism that the community controls. The purpose of the police accountability boards, as they were in the Maryland Police Accountability Act of 2021, was to provide a community an instrument that they control to be able to address many of the concerns around police accountability. And so and even if you look at the Anton's Law, which made changes to the Maryland Public Information Act, making investigatory records of law enforcement discretionary disclosures, we're seeing law enforcement push back, charging people absorbent amounts of money for the files needed to look at those records, making it difficult for people to get access, which shows that law enforcement feels threatened by the idea of the community having access to that information. So this is merely just one additional instrument that the community deserves in order to serve its proper oversight function of law enforcement. And every effort to do that, the General Assembly has been resistant to it. So for that reason, this bill is particularly important. I urge a favorable vote.